All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Waby Saby Parent Channel. I hope everyone's doing well. How are you doing, Coach Daniel?
Doing very well, thank you.
It's been a minute since we did a episode here. It's just that everyone. We're just thinking about doing it this more regularly. But we're thankful for all our new subscribers, right? And if you had any questions or comments about previous episodes, you can always reach out to us. But today we are talking about two common storylines that keep parents in a loop. So when you say in a loop, what does that mean, Daniel?
Yes, when I say in a loop, it means in a kind of unpleasant loop. It's a loop whereby we think something something isn't the way it should be. We identify something that we look at as a problem,
What's the
and then we
problem? Yeah.
react to that problem, and then we think even more that this is a situation that's uh,
Unacceptable, right?
unacceptable, exactly,
Yeah.
right, and then we react, and that's a loop, and if we with the parent dimension, it involves our child, so in one way or another. That's how I think of the loop scenario.
Yeah, I think about it as, right, you say there's a trigger and your response, and that kind of, and you whatever, however you respond, kind of spirals out of control and kind of make the situation worse. And so in the realm of sleep, I think, or like if you have a child who has trouble sleeping, it's not uncommon that this comes up, at the end of the day when everyone's tired, you're ready to go to bed, and you just don't have the capacity because your tank is quite low capacity to sort of keep it together. And so in one prior episode, we talked about um, the gas and the brake model, where in the brake, that's where there's hyper arousal, and that hyper arousal is usually, at least, like, if caused by sort of how we respond to our kids at night, right? So when they're trying to sort of find like that feeling of safety as they're about to go to sleep, but then because we're tired, we can't really give that feeling of safety to them because we're also tired or maybe triggered by their behaviors at night. um, we kind of explain that it's helpful to be aware of what's going on underneath, right? That we talked about the missing link at what's going on underneath our on the surface, underneath the surface. And so I think that's the idea here, is what are the two common storylines that are going on underneath when this is all playing out during bedtime. Did I set that up right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we were talking about, like simplified down to, like, there's like two things
Two
that
things,
can really
yes.
help to keep an eye out for any parent out there who's want to help their kids with sleep.
All right, so it's two storylines. So you can first, the first storyline pertains to, there's something wrong with my child. Right. So there are two things that you could potentially, like, if you're being triggered at bedtime, you can potentially there can be a storyline where if your child is having a major meltdown, it doesn't have to be at bedtime, or any time during the day. Um, One thing that can be causing this surge of unpleasant feelings in you is that there's a thought that maybe something is not right, or there's something going on with your child. So for me, like, we have a daughter who has trouble settling it at night, and so my idea, when she cannot sleep or she's really rowdy at night, is, does my child have ADHD? And that makes me and of course, if I have that thought, that makes me even more stressed out, more worried, and then that also doesn't help the situation. So, how about you? Do you have any sort of thoughts about your kids that make you sort of respond in a way that escalates this situation?
I think when we were discussing this prior to recording this episode, my default is not so much to think that there's something wrong with my child, or I think like they shouldn't behave like this, or they shouldn't act like this, or they shouldn't think like that. But it's much more the second one for me.
All right. So then, okay. So then, leading up to the second one, that's a good segue then. So why don't we just? So the second storyline would be there is something wrong with the way I parent. So I'll just simplify it. So I'm trying to build awareness, especially when you're in the thick of it, right? And then, of course, it's easy to say, "Oh, you should build awareness." And what are some of the thoughts that are coming up as you feel all the feelings? So the second one would be there's something wrong with the way I parent. And actually, this, because it pertains to you, and we are usually hard on ourselves, right? So this is actually not surprising that it's more pervasive, that we end up kind of criticizing the way we are or the way we show up as parents. So yeah, when does that come up for you? Like, is it around bedtime or?
Well, a common one for me is the one where, you know, your kids want to, our kids wanted to like play with me, like, pretend
Oh,
play
right.
with some toys,
Yeah.
and like, hey, like, do you want to play with this? And like, to me, that's not so fun. It's not. I don't particularly enjoy that. So my default is sort of like thinking like, no, I don't want to, play like with with dolls or something like that. And then the thought I have about that is like, what's wrong with you, Daniel? Like, hey, you want to have kids, and now that your kid is asking you to play with you, why don't you play with your kid? Like, something you're doing wrong here. And then that, of course, makes me feel like upset and like I'm self-critical. And then I definitely I'm not in the mood to play. And then it kind of like, and then that becomes a cycle itself. So maybe not exactly like something wrong with the way I parent, but still, it's still
Yeah, so
something
sort of
wrong with me
adjacent to
in the
that. Yeah.
role as a parent, something like that.
Right, right. So it's good. So it's quite simple. When the next time you get, sort of triggered or hooked, and let's say your child is not behaving as you would want them to, and it's causing you to have all the feelings. A good way to kind of start practicing getting to that sort of awareness is asking those two questions. What are the thoughts I have regarding my child and or regarding the way I parent? And usually it would be one or the other. And so what does that why do we do this, Daniel? Like, what does it help with? Or I mean, or does it help with anything?
Well, probably not, because I always think of it this way, that we have like this survival machine of a brain that always wants to keep us, safe and sound. And when it identifies something that it thinks is not the way it should be, like the way a kid behaves, or something like that, then it goes into like this problem solving mode, and it's like, oh, this is a problem. My child should not behave like this. This is wrong. There's something wrong with my child. It comes from like the brain as a problem solving machine. It always wants to like identify problems, or something happens and we go like, this shouldn't be happening. There's something I'm doing wrong. I'm doing something wrong as a parent. And it's like the brain by default wants to identify problems because they want to solve problems. So I think this is part of like the identifying problem, part of the brain, if you will, that just does this.
That's true. But even with identifying the underlying storyline or the thoughts that are sort of driving the way you feel in the moment, um, I think I know often like the 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 assumption is that the goal is to change those thoughts, right? But actually, the I think it's again, like I mentioned earlier, is to build awareness and to be okay with, you know, thinking these thoughts. And then maybe if you are sort of now aware of what your thoughts are, um, sort of maybe think about your, you know, that you are just doing your best as a parent in that moment. And then maybe you can also extend that compassion to your child, and that maybe your child is doing their best in that moment. And so by doing that, you can kind of widen that space between the trigger and the response, and prevent that being stuck in the loop, right? Like what we discussed, you know, in the beginning of the episode. Um, so yeah, I think, you know, building self awareness, and then when building self awareness, kind of introducing some more practice into building more self compassion is, or as you mentioned here, be kind to ourselves. Um, so yeah, I thought that's definitely helpful in terms of practicing. You don't have to practice it at bedtime. Sometimes I tell parents to maybe practice it during the day when you have more energy and like feel like rested. Like, oh, I wonder why this my kid is acting this way at this point. Like, and then if you're having some uncomfortable feelings, practice it. And when you practice it in kind of lighter, easier moments, you have more ability to practice it when you're in the thick of it, and when it's harder at nighttime. All right. So, any other things to add, Daniel?
No, I think you said it, but just saying the same thing in a different way is that these two storylines, there's something wrong with my child, or there's something wrong with the way I parent. They can look like just observations that we just like, oh, I've found something here. But in reality, to me, they're just a version of self criticism. When we think there's something wrong with my child, well, that child comes from us, right? Either nature or nurture, like it comes from us. So when we think there's something wrong with the child, it's sort of like we're criticizing ourselves, by
That's true. Kind
detour
of
of our child. And when we think
reflection
there's
of
something
you.
wrong with the way I parent, that's just self-criticism, thinking
Yes,
something is wrong with us. So they are sort of camouflaged ways of self-criticism, and that is really an invitation for self-kindness. So yeah, just echoing what you said, really.
perfect. All right. Well, I hope that was helpful. And then if you have any comments, questions, please don't hesitate to write in the comment section.